My name is Fred Diamond with the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. To all the people on Zoom, how you doing? Good to see you. Just a reminder, if you're on Zoom and you live in the DMV for future programs, come inside. Come to the Carasoft Conference on Collaboration Center. We have plenty of food. Love to see you. For all the people here in the room, how you doing? All right. You excited to learn from some sales gurus / experts? All right, good. So yes, thank you so much. My name is Fred Diamond with the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. I want to recognize Gina Stracuzzi with our Center for Elevating Women in Sales Leadership in the back there. For people in the room, you also have an opportunity to get a copy of her new book, Success Was Not the Hard Part. If you're on Zoom, thank you so much. If you have any comments or questions, just submit them into the chat. Here's how we're going to go today. We're going to go to about 9:15, 9:20 with the panel. Then we're going to do about a 10-minute breakout. So if you're on Zoom, we're going to put you into groups of 5. If you're in the room, our esteemed sales experts are going to come out at your table, and we're going to address some of the questions that we bring up in the first part. We'll then come back up on stage at 9:30 for about 10 minutes with wrap up and follow up. And then Tom's going to bring us home at the end with some thoughts. We're going to be recording today, obviously. Andrea, remind her to hit the record button. So we're going to be slicing up the segments with all of our speakers. We'll put them up on YouTube, and you'll have a chance to watch them again. And you'll also have a chance to meet them afterwards. If you have your phones today, take pictures, go to LinkedIn, link into all of our speakers. You can see their names around the room. We have Kevin Carr with Cvent, Brian Green with Generative Selling, and Tom Snyder with Funnel Clarity. My name is Fred Diamond and Gina Stracuzzi. If you haven't linked into us, do so over the course of the next little bit. And also, please take pictures and tag the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. All right, if you're in the room, who's excited to learn something new today? Who thinks they know everything about sales? Please raise your hand and sit down. All right, very good. All right, so you're going to walk away with things. And it was interesting during the reception before we started today. One of our attendees said, "Give me 2 things that you're not going to talk about at the panel." And I said, "All right, here's 2 things. The first thing is write things down." So you have IEPS notepads at every table. Your brain works differently when you write things down. Take a notepad, write things down. Second thing I said was get to know your company. We'll talk about that later. All right, so we got 3 great panelists here. They're all great friends of the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. They've been on our stage before. They've been on the Sales Game Changers podcast. Since it's July, we said, let's do a tribute to some of our great experts here. And let's get going. By the way, if you have questions throughout, feel free to raise your hand. We'll take your questions throughout, but we got some great ones here. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask the question. Give us a very brief introduction about yourself before you answer the question. The first question, let's just kind of get right to it. What's your number 1 piece of advice, sales advice that always works? Kind of like your go-to thing. You know, if I were to ask people who report to you, what would they say is your go-to advice? Kind of like where I just said, write things down with a pen. That's one of my go-tos. Let's start at the left here with Kevin Carr with Cvent. Kevin, by the way, was one of our first podcast guests, Sales Game Changers podcast, episode number 9, I believe it was. He's with Cvent. Cvent's been a great partner to the IEPS almost since our inception.
So I actually been interviewed twice.
Yeah, is the mic on?
The mic is on.
Okay.
Can you hear me? So I've actually been interviewed twice on your podcast. So it's an honor to be here, Fred. And as Fred said, a vice president of sales for Cvent. And Cvent has a long partnership with the Institute, and we're happy to be here and be a part of it. My go-to is very, very basic. And I listen to a lot of calls on Zoom after the fact, and I can tell if a call is going to go well within the first 45 seconds. That's whether or not the salesperson confirms the time of the meeting. It sounds so basic, but how many times have you been on a call, you think you have an hour, and then 22 minutes into the meeting, the customer says, "Oh, I've got a hard stop at the bottom of the hour." So when a rep confirms the time, I know that this is going to be a better than average sales call.
Very good. All right, just FYI for the speakers, bring the mic close to your mouth so that we can hear you a little better on Zoom. All right, Brian Green, by the way, you're episode number 1 of the Sales Game Changers podcast. We also have a big award event every year. Brian was our first Partner of the Year. And he's been a customer of the IEPS at companies like Learning Tree and other great places. So it's great to have you here. And we actually just recorded a new podcast with you, Sales Game Changers, talking about what you're doing now with generative selling. So same question, what is your go-to?
Thank you, Fred. So I would say that mine's relatively as simple as Kevin's, but it really is sweat the details and sweating the details, but methodically, right? And so what that really means is I've got kind of four cornerstones that we talk about, that I've talked about my entire career with sales teams and folks that I mentor and coach. There are four key elements of any great close, which is establishing trust with your buyers, with the program offices, with any of the stakeholders that are involved. Trust in yourself, trust in the organization. That's the first number one thing that any Harvard, McKinsey study will always tell you, is that all buyers don't advance forward until they feel a trustworthy relationship exists. The second is really confidence. Confidence in your capabilities, your solutions, your current work stream, your use cases, your testimonials. Having confidence in your ability of your company serving their needs is number two. Number three is what Ariel and I were just talking about at the table, is positioning. Understanding where that buyer journey is and all the various stakeholders that are involved in that buyer journey. There's anywhere from 7 to 8. Some reports now tell you 10 to 15, which is obnoxious. But nonetheless, there are a lot of stakeholders. So understanding the positioning that's necessary to effectively deliver the solution that you're delivering. And then the fourth one, and the most important one, is momentum. If your deals are stalled, momentum has stalled, and therefore you have to go back to the first three. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But trust, confidence, positioning, and momentum, I would say you got to sweat those details to be effective.
Very good. All right. And Tom Snyder, Tom was the 2024 Institute for Effective Professional Selling Sales Leadership Speaker of the Year. He's been featured on our podcast many times. He's also been featured on our stage. Every month we do a sales stage live, and Tom usually wraps it up like he's going to do today. Tom, what is your go-to?
Yeah, thanks, Fred. First of all, great comments from my colleagues up here. I think one of the things that most salespeople suffer from is a funnel that is crowded with wishes and dreams and hopes and aspirations and a very tiny amount of actual opportunity. There are four things that drive whether or not something belongs in the funnel and should stay there, and most of us think qualification is a step in a process. It's not. It's the whole process. Do I have evidence an opportunity exists that comes in three categories? Do I have evidence we can compete? It comes in three categories. Do I have evidence we can win? It comes in four categories. Do I have evidence I can deliver on that expectation? Now, those sound sequential, but if you're actually interacting on a multi-threaded opportunity, you're going to pick up pieces of data that fit in each of the four of them. One thing can change your life if you learn that qualification goes through those four gates and it goes on from beginning to close.
That is a great point. For people in the audience here, show of hands, who here has deals in their pipeline that fit that qualification that Tom just said? They're pipe dreams, they ain't never going to happen, but they're there because they look great. Every hand should pretty much go up. Tom, along those lines, give us one thing, one piece of conventional sales advice, if you will, that no longer works. And for people watching this in the future, today it's July 9th, 2026. Obviously, a lot has changed in B2B and B2G selling over the past couple of years. What's one bit of conventional sales advice that no longer works in today's B2B or B2G environment?
Boy, there's a lot of them. There's been a tectonic change in sales over the last 18 months. I hope you feel it. I can pick a number of them. The one that comes to mind is that discovery is a process that starts an opportunity, and it's legitimate to uncover the information of the basics. What do they do for a living? What is the concern of the individual you're talking to, et cetera, as though that was the first time you've been exposed to it. With all the tools available to us now, you have to be heavily informed going into the first call with any one of those decision makers that are present as to a lot of knowledge you have to generate really insightful questions, not just who, what, when, where, why of their experience. That's changed dramatically. You have to know far more on an initial meeting than you ever did before.
Brian.
Yeah, so I would say that there's always a focus on closing. That's how we make our money. That's how we help support and serve our customers and our organization. But there's almost an incessant focus on closing. And I would always say that don't focus on closing for closing's sake. Focus on advancing momentum. So long as that the client continues to feel they're getting to their end state. And what's that end state? Their end state is I have a problem. I have a sense of urgency. I have a boss that's on top of me. I have a program team that needs this installation. I need to deploy this technology, right? And through that buyer journey, there is a lot of iterations of trust and confidence building and reaching out to their peers and their stakeholders and their leadership and deconflicting a lot of things internally in that buyer process. So I would say that as a selling profession, we should be focused much more on advancing momentum. And with momentum, you then know the right point to close. If you try to close too fast, you're going to lose your client and they're going to feel it, right? So focus on momentum in order to close, not just focusing on the close itself.
Yeah, Kevin.
I would say the biggest change is that thinking that we know more about our products than our customers do. There are, sales training going on. We're in this room to do sales training, but there is buyer training. Buyers are so much more prepared than ever before. They know your customers, they know your competitors, they know your price, they know what works with your product, and they also know what doesn't work. And they're testing you on your sales calls. The old days, the salesperson knew everything about the product and the customer knew nothing. Now the flipped. So you have to go into a call knowing that your prospects are much better informed than even you may be on a sales call.
Now, that's a great point. I worked at Apple Computer for a long time. We would do 2-day product overviews, and people would be clamoring, listening to what we had to say. Now they could just go, like you said, to any place on the internet, and within 4 seconds, they can get Apple's product strategy for the next 5 years. So you need to be able to do that. We have a lot of for the people here in sales, who here is hungry? Who here wants to do great in sales? Who here doesn't? Stand up. All right. So if you're here today, by the way, you're here. You showed up in person and on Zoom. Thank you. We're writing down things. You want to take your sales career to the next level. Who wants to be very successful in 10 years from now in sales? All right, good for you. A little bit less hands. All right, good. Esteemed panel for these younger selling professionals who want that great career in sales. Tell them the biggest mistake that you see selling professionals make that they should remove from their performance. What is a mistake that you've seen that you want our audience in person and on Zoom to eliminate from their process? And let's start with Brian, then Kevin, then Tom.
So I would say two things from a standards standpoint of our profession as a whole. Activity is not progress, right? Activity is not momentum. From a modern standpoint, I would say that how I see people using AI in many cases are phenomenal, right? In other cases I see are horrendous. And so we can't get into that whole discussion today, but I would say that there is a cottage industry of using AI very, very poorly. And there are so many incredibly insightful reports and videos and training education on how to use AI effectively. Because while we're using it, buyers are also using it, and they can sniff that out instantly, right? So number two, getting back to the original point, was activity over progress. So activity is not progress. And so being very busy right, is not progress. Being very purposeful is progress. So be purposeful. Don't be active, right? Be purposeful in the efforts that you do.
Well, one, I'm not sure I'll be selling in 10 years. I hope to be alive in 10 years. I have different goals at this stage in my career. One of the things, it's not so much what I would stop doing, it's what I would continue to do and really don't be afraid to do. And that's ask for help. My best reps are the ones that use their managers the most. They ask for help, they strategize, they role play. When a deal goes wrong, they speak to their manager. God, I had this as 100% commit and I lost it. Can we debrief it? The junior reps, they crawl up under a rock when they lose a sale. They don't want to talk about it because it was never their fault, right? It was the price or the product. The great reps always will look in the mirror as they're preparing for their calls. After they win, what can I replicate? And if I lose, what did I do wrong and what can I lose from that? So I would really lean in on my network of peers and my managers to always ask for help with strategy, role playing, and kind of thought process.
That's a great answer. And actually, I have some friends of my children who work at companies like Cvent and Carahsoft and Adobe and other companies like that. And when they reach out to me and ask for advice, I always say this: go find a parent of one of your friends who's in sales, right? And go say, I'd like to talk to you 8 o'clock at Starbucks in Vienna or Tyson's, wherever you live. I just want to ask you questions, and come prepared with a list of questions. What would you do? How would you handle this? For the people on the panel here, and Gina Stracuzzi and Brian Shea, we love to get people requesting our expertise, right? We would be thrilled to talk about advice like we're doing right now. And I know that sales managers, same thing, they want to be talking about improvement. Sales is something that you can continue to improve on. Tom, what are your thoughts?
I definitely agree with what my colleagues have said here. The one thing I would say is that if you've ever played an instrument, if you've ever played a sport, if you've ever been in a chess match or try to be a chess master, what made you good? What made you good? It was practice, because sales is a skill. It is one thing to understand how you can regurgitate models about questioning. You can regurgitate what the customer decision journey looks like. You can regurgitate all the wisdom that these esteemed people up here say. It's practice. If I had one thing to tell you how to get better, get a colleague in role play, get a manager in role play, and do it relentlessly. It doesn't take a lot of time. 10 minutes a day makes a huge difference, because the human element in sales has never been more important and easier to ignore. Never been more important or easier to ignore. We have a noble profession. Without us, nothing happens. That's why if you want to be good, practice. They call it practicing law, practicing medicine, practicing accounting. We call it sales. Practice.
Yeah, we'll get more into detail on that. And that's why we used to be known as the Institute for Excellence in Sales. And we changed our name May of last year to the Institute for Effective Professional Selling. If you're in sales at a company that's represented today, you are a professional. What do professionals do? They practice. What does a golf professional do? He or she is on the greens for 5 hours a day, on the tee box, working on the chip shots, whatever it is. What should you be doing to continue to practice your skill? Brian touched on AI. I want to talk a little bit about AI. Who in the audience is familiar with AI? Who in the audience uses AI for your selling process in various places through the selling process? All right, for people on Zoom, not as many hands went up. Panel, I want to get your advice. Of course, AI is changing every part of selling. What should sales professionals absolutely embrace utilizing AI in the sales process? And maybe if you want to say things they should. And by the way, a little plug here, Tom Snyder is part of the Institute for Effective Professional Selling AI and selling effectiveness solution. It's a part of our sales selling essentials marketplace. We're bringing a solution together utilizing AI for selling effectiveness, and it's been greatly received by many companies around the globe. Tom, with that plug, why don't you take the question first, and then we'll go to Kevin, then to Brian.
Yeah, the question is, how does AI fit into my sales world? And then the big mistake, McKinsey will tell you it's 83% of the companies who've tried it. The big mistake is ready, go get some AI. That's what we got to do. It's all over the place. Go get some and we'll be better. That's kind of like giving a 4-year-old a handgun and telling them not to hurt themselves. The idea is you first need to understand what is the best practice workflow. It's too much to go into, but essentially how does best practice marry together with the customer's decision journey so that best practice really is a skill and strategy, not an intention. When you've got that mapped out, you can then decide where can AI enhance my effectiveness and my efficiency. Otherwise, you're buying tools, you're implementing them, and you're causing chaos. You know that most of the companies that we studied who've implemented AI did worse. Revenue went down, performance went down. It's not the fact that the promise can't be fulfilled. It's that there was no rigor to the implementation. Just people, quick, go on chat, go on Gemini, pull down Claude, quick, get the Salesforce.com AI implementation. It doesn't work like that. This is really about the rigor of deciding what your process is, aligning with best practice, and then looking for the nodes where AI can be most helpful.
So obviously AI is going to be important for all of us and everything that we do. I'll give you a quick use case where we've embraced it at Cvent. So we record our calls, with Zoom or with Chorus, and we get the transcripts for the calls. And what a good rep does is they take some of that transcript and they put it into chat or Claude or your AI of choice and ask for criticism. What could I have done better? What did I miss? One thing that we did, and I know that when you're in enterprise sales, you get a lot of your business with displacements, right? You're trying to replace a current provider. We had a client, we asked them what they thought about their current provider, and she went on for a number of minutes on all the things that she was frustrated by from this particular vendor. We took that transcript and we asked ChatGPT to take the transcript and convert that into 10 discovery questions. And those questions were much better than we could have ever come up with on our own. So that's using multiple things within AI. Well, it was Zoom plus Chorus plus chat with a thoughtful prompt, and we got great advice. So AI in and of itself is a crutch. If how you use it purposefully is going to be the big difference.
It's on, I think. Sorry. All right. So Fred said that we might be talking about AI. So I pulled down a report from Harvard, and who can tell me the number one sort of reason why people are using AI today? Number one, just shout it out. Writing, homework, answer questions, life advice. Now we're getting closer. The number one reason people are using AI is for therapy and companionship. Guess what was last year? Therapy and companionship. That's probably a little bit maybe a view into our society as a whole. But AI for 2026, number one, therapy and companionship. Number two, I think somebody said troubleshooting. Number three, fun and nonsense. Number four, fan fiction and storytelling. Then we get to technical use of software at number five, autonomous agentic operations at number six. That's probably the most interesting data set, is that the autonomous agentic operations, which to me in my mind is the real game changer for how organizations are using AI, is agentic AI, where they're beginning to build bots that actually do the work for them. I serve several organizations on the West Coast in Silicon Valley, and nearly 90% of the clients I serve in Silicon Valley are already using AI agentic agents for SDRs, right? It also happens that SDRs is the highest rate of turnover in any selling organization at somewhere around 45%. So you think about a business problem and a business technology, CEOs and COOs are looking at high turnover roles in SDRs and replacing them with AI agents. So what do we have to do? Right? As a selling profession, right, we have to get really good at using technology, just like we learned how to use the internet, just like how we learned how to not click on every link that we learned how to click on that opened up backdoor portals, right? We have to really embrace AI, not as a therapy and companionship friend, but also really, as Kevin just said, in really utilizing it to advance a good thought process, right, with good prompts, with good outcomes. And it is a very, very powerful tool. We use it consistently at our team as well.
Can I pick up on that for a minute? I don't know if most of you realize that the power to echo what Brian was just saying, the power of AI in our profession lies in a number of things, principally agents and projects. And agents and projects can be very seductive if you realize that you can build an agent which can be your assistant, your coach. It could be everything, and it never sleeps, and it works 24 hours a day, and therein lies a problem. Because if you don't train it and you don't give it the right directions, they wander off the reservation. You can find yourself, there was a moment at Google where they had built thousands of agents, and one of the folks in engineering had innocently built something to help that was unique to his responsibility, and it wandered off the reservation and began erasing a large part of the algorithm until alarms went off. The whole idea is you can put 8,000 words in a prompt. Did you know that? 8,000 words. The quality of what comes back depends upon the quality of the prompt. And when you ask AI, any of them, Chat, Gemini, any of them something, you better be sure you're giving it the directions of exactitude as much as possible, and always add in the sentence, do not hallucinate, give me only verified and verifiable sources. And even then, you're going to have to be careful. I think, again, to echo what Brian was saying, yes, there are a lot of people who are using now AI agents as their SDR, BDR replacement. We'll see how that goes. I think there has been, even now, a bit of backflow that sometimes these agents, when not built correctly, can be counterproductive. So again, I come back to the point, know how you're going to structure your agents and train that agent to do what you want and stay out of the other part of the business.
Just kind of thinking as I'm looking at our panel here, and Gina and Brian Shea, if we were at dinner, we could probably talk for 2 hours about great customer meetings that we've had. And for the people watching on Zoom and in the room, a lot of the great part of the sales process is getting to meet with customers and prospects. Every day you're sitting in front of your computer doing the AI stuff, that's great, but the juice and the excitement in the sales process comes with meeting with customers. I could think right now as I'm bringing up this topic of a half a dozen great meetings I've had over the last 20 some odd years with customers in their office or at a location talking about what they're dealing with. So panel, we're talking about AI and how customers can go to AI. Do they need the sales professional? Whatever. The answer, of course, is yes. But since buyers are doing more research than ever before, utilizing some of the tools we just talked about, how do you earn a meeting with a customer in the chance to show and have the opportunity that you can provide value for them, right? For a lot of the people in the room here, you might be SDR or early stage. might be sending out a ton of emails, might be sending out, maybe you're making calls, maybe you're using tool devices, using LinkedIn, trying to figure out how can you get to the customer to give you some of their time so that you can communicate the value that you bring. Panel, how can the people watching today in the room get those meetings and have the opportunity to show their value? Let's go, Kevin, Brian, Tom.
I always think about the worst question to hear on a sales call, and you've probably heard it a lot. It is the all-time worst question. Tell me what keeps you up at night. That's really as a salesperson, you've given up on how to sell. You're saying, hey, I mean, where do you want to spend some money? Versus going into a sales call and sharing with your customers something that they don't know about their business, their market, their competitors. So they're looking for you. We all aspire to be the trusted advisor, and that's a very, very, very high bar. But the first way to do it is to go in there prepared with a little bit of research and knowledge about their space, about them, about their department. Number of large departments, especially if you're selling to the federal government, they rely on their salespeople for information from other departments within their agency. So you can be a huge advocate for them if you are bringing them information. So that's how two ways to build trust is one, bringing them information that they probably don't know, and two, asking great questions and listening to their response and following up with another great question. Make it about them, not about you, not about your product.
Great, Brian.
Love that. So I'm going to dovetail something that Kevin said. So I said a statement earlier about how 99% of buyers will suggest or confirm or agree that they're not going to move forward unless there's a trusted relationship with a trusted organization, right? But to Kevin's point, only when you ask those buyers, how many selling professionals are you engaged with that you have a high trust relationship with, it's less than 18%. So if there's a gap today that you can immediately begin mitigating with your customers, is start to think about how you're creating trusted relationships. And it starts with what Kevin just said. Your ability of researching the sense of urgency, right? As John Carr says at Leading Change, what's the greatest, easiest way of creating change within an organization is find the sense of urgency. When you find the sense of urgency, guess what's going to happen? You're also going to find the money, as we were talking about earlier, right? So if you can find the money and you can find the sense of urgency, now you have to have a great story. And not a great story that's from AI, fictitious storytelling, but now what's the story that you want to tell that begins to break down their wall? That story is your use cases, right? Your testimonials, your programs, your services, your solutions. What's the impact and the benefit that you're creating at your organization? Can you get your prospect and your customer together on a phone to have a conversation about what you guys have done? If you're serving in the federal government, they generally speaking can't provide a public testimonial, but they'll pick up a phone call for you and say, yeah, I'll reach out to Tom over at HHS. I'll have a conversation, right? Market research, cloak everything in market research, right? But nonetheless, that the importance of establishing trust is not what you're just telling them. You have to show them. And showing them means put your best foot forward in your best use cases and make sure that you market the heck out of this.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those statements. I wanted to take a minute and tell you how to start a conversation with someone that doesn't know you. You're not on their calendar, and you're literally calling them, I hate this word, cold. Now, what happens when you receive that call? Oh, thanks for calling. I didn't have anything to do. I was hoping someone I never heard of would call me. Come on. That's whatever you do about oh, how's it going? You don't even care how it's going. The whole bottom line is I have to do what psychologists call a pattern interrupt. If I were to say to all of you, In the biblical story of the great flood, how many of each animal did Moses bring on the ark? Most would tell me two. Moses didn't have an ark. Noah did.
Hmm.
Now, the reason the brain wants to think two is because the brain works in a certain way that doesn't want to wake up your frontal cortex. So you can do it so easily. You need to arouse curiosity, and you can do it by a pattern interrupt, and the pattern interrupt is easy to find. Look on LinkedIn and find out if they're in a group you're in. Look on LinkedIn and see if they recently spoke at a conference. Once you do that, you will hear them pause. Hi, Bob. This is Tom Snyder. I was doing some research on you and your firm, and I noticed that, fill in the blank. Now, Bob is, unless he really is busy or really is on his way to a meeting, he's going to stop. Now, I know I've got it. My next statement is not, oh, let me tell you all about me. My next statement is to tell you what I know about the challenges you and your peers are currently focused on. Think of the titles of the breakout sessions in conferences. And all you have to do is say, I've noticed recently, or the last 5 people in your role I've spoken with, or seem to be paying a lot of attention to X. I wonder if that's something that has your attention. That will almost always ensue with a conversation. Even if the attitude isn't welcoming, you still got it. And that a few minutes you can say, I interrupted your day. I only have a few minutes myself. Why don't we take out the calendar and see if we can reserve 45 minutes or an hour to really talk this through? Now, whether that's someone in a brand new prospect or someone in an opportunity you're working with who doesn't know you, you haven't been introduced by their colleagues, but you need to be multi-threaded, that will work. That will work.
I'm going to ask a slightly different question here as we lead up to the breakout. For people in the audience and on Zoom who might be in a relationship, you know how you're sometimes wondering what the other person is thinking? Anybody ever go through anything like that? Okay. Panelists, all 3 of you have dealt with thousands of customers at this point. What are customers thinking about? Give us some of your thoughts. Share with the audience here, the selling professionals. Think hard. You've dealt with, once again, hundreds, if not thousands of customers, some who've become a customer, some who didn't, some who stopped, some who've been with you for 10, 15, 20 years, maybe at multiple companies. What do you think they're thinking about? Share that with the audience. And that'll take us up to our breakout in about 8 minutes. Tom, why don't you go first, and then Brian, then Kevin. Give us some insights on your thoughts on what your customers are thinking about.
Yeah, so let's leave the personal out of it. I'd say most people that encounter sales folks, no matter whether you've had a relationship for a long time or not, I think the word that Brian has said several times, trust. And trust is the evaluation of friend or foe, and the evaluation of, are you trying to be a help to me and help me provide insight, or are you trying to sell something to me? I think the underlying ethos of that is risk. There is a risk anytime anybody in a position of authority is considering making a change, making a purchase, doing something new. So they're generally evaluating all the way along, not just trust in you, but trust in the way they're making the decision. So be a counselor of a great decision. Be a counselor of a great decision for both you and the customer, and you will keep risk suppressed.
Yeah, I would say that I would say that Tom hit the nail on the head, right? If you're engaging at the right level, right? There's never been an executive that I've ever had any engagement with who is not thinking about the risk to their organization, the risk to their people, making payroll, delivering a mission that the secretary has marked as a high priority, right? They're thinking about advancement, advancing their mission, advancing the sort of the revenue within their organization, depends if you're public, private sector. So I would say that if you're dealing at the right level, tap into that sense of urgency that executive has. That is the fastest way, if you're equipped with the right knowledge, opportunity to speak to that sense of urgency. That's the best way of getting, right, as we talked about earlier, how to get the meeting, how to get attention of the organization, is to tap into that and sort of be that trusted advisor, as Kevin was talking about. I would also say that if you're not dealing at the right level, right, most of those people are wasting your time and wasting their peers' time, right? And so if they're not acting with a sense of urgency, you're probably at the wrong level, right? Everyone's got a boss, of course, right? We all have bosses, but make sure that you're operating at a level where people can make decisions and they feel the pressures to make those decisions.
I love this question because it's so basic. And Brian touched on it. At our core, we want to be one thing in front of our boss. We want to look smart, or we want to avoid embarrassment. It's those two things. So what can I do to help my client, whether they're a sales rep, sales manager, VP, CEO? The CEO does not want to look embarrassed in front of their board. The CEO wants to go to a board meeting with absolute confidence. If I can help them do either of those things, I'm going to uncover some pain and some opportunity. So sometimes we don't have to overthink what we do. There's a human element. I want to make my customer more successful in front of their boss, or less, or minimize the risk of embarrassment in front of my boss. And really, that's it.
A couple of things. One is, for people in the room who are selling IT and IT related services, your customer wants to keep their job, right? Your customer, I know there's some people who sell enterprise type software like SAP. There used to be an old adage where you don't want to be the guy who spent $500 million on a SAP implementation that didn't work, right? You want those people, your customers, they want to keep their job. They're not looking for risk. They're not looking for, great opportunities to bring in new things, maybe a little bit of innovation, but for the most part, they want their operation to flow. I remember we did a Sales Game Changers podcast episode with a couple of CIOs. And I asked them, what do you want from selling professionals? And I thought they were going to say product strategy, introductions to Bill Gates, whatever it might be. They said, just tell us how to work with your company. They also, how to submit an invoice, how to get technical support, how to get some advice on some compliance, things related to that, basic things. And one of the advice I give this all the time to selling professionals, especially those who are new, get to know your company. Obviously, you want to know your boss, people in marketing, get to know people in finance, get to know people in fulfillment, get to know how your company operates, how it works. That, in a lot of times, is the value that you're going to bring. We're going to do a breakout in about 3 minutes. Tom, I want to ask you one question. I want to ask you to define value. We've used the word trust here many times. Sales Game Changers podcast. Who listens to sales podcasts? Take out your phones during the breakout. Search Sales Game Changers podcast. It's one of the top 5 sales podcasts for you. We did a survey of the 3 most uttered words in the history of the podcast. Relationships was number 3. Trust was number 2. Value was number 1. Tom, as we go into the breakout here in about a minute, define value for the audience.
Right. So we did about a 3-year study of that idea. What is value in the interaction between sellers and buyers, B2G, B2B? And it was incredibly revealing. It echoes some of the things my colleagues have set up here. There are 3 paths to creating value, and the reward of being a value creator instead of a value communicator are hard to exaggerate. Our profession 30 years ago was about be a value communicator. Today, that's of no interest. Be a value creator and you win. You even win if you're the most expensive option. Comes in 3 categories. Help the people who are making a decision see a problem they didn't recognize or the magnitude of a problem they thought was minor, and you will be a counselor. Help people see a solution they didn't realize existed, another path to heaven than what they knew about, and you will be rewarded. And here's the real kicker. Broker the capabilities of your company even if it's not related directly to what you're hoping to sell them. Bring the expertise and make it available to them before they buy anything. Today, our profession demands that we create value before anything is purchased. Isn't that interesting? And if we're still relying on the product or service to be that delivery, we're going to lose. We need to create value for those people making the decision, and it comes in one or more of those three categories, and you can be rewarded. To not do it, you're risking not existing for after a while.
All right, so we're going to take a breakout right now, not a break, but a breakout. So I'm going to ask our panelists to go to the tables. Gina, maybe you could take the fourth table as well. And here's the question. We're going to go for about 8 minutes. Then we're going to come back for final questions. The question is, what's working for you? Share with your table what's working for you right now as a selling professional. If you want to get some food, if you want to get coffee, panelists, grab a table. We're going to go till about 9:29. Then we're going to come back with wrap-up questions. And just once again, I want to acknowledge all the people who are here and on Zoom for taking time to grow as a professional. All right, we're going to be having the breakout right now, and then we're going to come back at 9:29. So let's get started here with the wrap-up. Thank you so much, audience, once again. And once again, I just want to acknowledge the people who were here today, in person and on Zoom. Seriously, but sales is a profession. If you're a professional, be a professional. How do you learn, etc.? All right. If anyone has any questions for the panel, give Gina has the mic. I'm going to ask one more or two more questions, but we're happy to take some questions from the audience. For the panel, so the best sales professionals consistently outperform everybody else. What are the top selling professionals doing? Again, it's for the people watching this in the future, it's July 9th, 2026. Tell us the one or two things, the top performers on your team, the top performers at your partners in your company. What are they doing? What is setting them aside? Kevin, why don't you go first?
They have an insatiable curiosity. They are curious about what the customers are doing, what they need, what's working, what's not working. They're curious about their peers on what's working, what's not working. We have a particular rep. We had a rep that closed a nice big deal, which was exciting. And I was somewhat, jaded, and I said to the manager, like, did any rep call or reach out to say, this is a great deal, how did you do it? And he said, yeah, one rep did. I bet you can guess who it was. And unsurprisingly, it was our number one rep. So they are constantly curious about ways to improve, ways to learn, and ways to develop, even though they have had a, probably 2-decade career thus far.
Love that. Yeah, I'll plus one that by saying insatiable curiosity, but also intellectual curiosity. Me and my table mates just talked about, right? How do we get attention when we happen to call a client and they actually pick up the phone, rather than going, oh my God, like what do I say, right? Is you have to be prepared to take that wall down that immediately goes up as soon as they recognize it's a phone, it's a sales call, right? And so having that intellectual curiosity is not at that moment in time, right? It's the 10 minutes, 30 minutes, hour before you made that call to really understand about everything that as we've been talking about this morning, about what's going on within the organization, and have a purpose for calling so that you know where to take that. I would also say, to Fred's point, that there's some phenomenal reports out there from McKinsey and Harvard and others that talk about the top quartile of high-performing reps are making 2.5 times the gross margin on their dollar versus the underperforming reps, right? Let me just say that again, 2.5 times more gross margin, right? From an executive standpoint, that's music to my ears, right? That rep is delivering more profit per dollar than the rest of the team, right? And so as a result, why, right? High-performing selling professionals are following structure, right? There is a system that they're following. There is a system for approaching their clients. There's a system for identifying need and strategy and investment. There's a system for identifying key stakeholders within the organization. They're following that script every single time, not mechanical, but as a pathway. So don't think that a selling professional is a off the hip, charismatic, wing it, right? Highly professional, highly successful selling professionals today are very scripted in their approach.
Yeah, I would add something to that. I think that if you look at the top performers in every company, we looked at 1,350 companies and analyzed both the sales force and their sales collective sales funnel. The top 3% performers in every one of those companies had the fewest number of deals in their funnel because they relentlessly made that opportunity qualify to stay. They took no reassurance from a funnel chock full of those wishes and dreams I talked about before. Oh, they like me. Let me put them in. Oh, I had a great conversation with Mary. Great. She's in my funnel. Everything becomes an opportunity, which means what? Your forecast stinks. You're way overloaded with lard and not real opportunity. Top performers relentlessly hone that funnel to make sure there is evidence and opportunity exists. And as they move along through those other three questions I mentioned, they continue to evaluate, should it stay? They don't have very many stalled deals.
So we've got a lot of great advice. I want to follow on to that question. Panel, I want you to be very specific. A lot of us are familiar with the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm going to ask you, give us two things. And we've given a lot of great advice about what selling professionals should be doing, practicing, role-playing, etc. I want you to give us 2 bits of implementable advice. For example, you may say, get up at 6 o'clock and jog for an hour, whatever it might be. I want you to give us 3 things that the people listening today on Zoom, and thank you very much if you're on Zoom and in the room, should start thinking about. Maybe something that's worked for you, maybe something that you see your top performers doing, specific, actionable things that they should do. Let's go, Brian, Tom, Kevin.
I love this question. So thank you for asking it, Fred. I would say that how you start your day is how your day will start, right? If you get up, watch the news, check your email, and get lost in how someone else is dictating your day, you'll never dictate your own day, right? You've got to wake up with some very purposeful incantations, a process, whether it's meditation, prayer, running, exercise, and get your head right at the beginning of the day and tell yourself what you're going to accomplish today. And the neuroplasticity that happens when you're extraordinarily purposeful in the morning is so powerful. Your brain doesn't know reality from fiction, right? If you wake up every day and say, I'm a powerhouse, I'm getting after it today, I'm going to serve my customers, I'm going to close a deal today, right? The amazing thing that happens in your brain is that you start to wire your brain with that type of expectation for yourself. And guess what the body does? The body follows, right? So I would say discipline in how you start your day. And I would also say the same thing as how you end your day, right? Regardless of a good day, a bad day, take notes, take lessons learned, document it, put it to bed, just like you put yourself to bed. Wake up the next day and start the same way.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I got to tell you. Let me piggyback on that. If you look at how most sellers use a calendar, it's to memorialize their obligations, be they meeting with customers, delivering something, internal meetings, conversations with their colleagues, whatever. There is an enormous difference between doing that and putting proactively in your calendar an obligation to yourself to do something. Fred asked for specificity. Find a slot in your calendar at least twice a week to practice your craft. even if it's 15 minutes, even if it's once a week, do it on a weekly basis and don't let it be interrupted unless you have some emergency with your family or your boss is mad at you. Literally, if it's in the calendar, it goes from intention to execution. Now, I would say to piggyback on Brian's, if I'm going to start my day any way that Brian just indicated, and you can personalize it, that was his message, put it in the calendar. Put the proactive part of your development in the calendar. One last thing. Recent research into pessimistic, optimistic thinking revealed something fascinating. Pessimism is a learned skill. The brain does what it's told. If I worry about, oh my God, this is going to go bad, guess what your brain's going to do? It's going to fulfill that. 1 minute a day. This blows my mind. 1 minute a day. Move people in several months from consistent testing that showed them pessimistic to optimistic. What did my colleague Brian tell you? 1 minute. Envision yourself successful. Make it part of that commitment in your calendar to yourself. I think it'll blow you away at what happens.
All right, Kevin, looking forward to
I know we're all in sales and we may not all be religious, but we've all prayed. So the power of prayer isn't a good way to forecast, but we've all been there. I think really just to touch on what Tom and Brian said, it's kind of basic, but it's so true. Great reps plan their day yesterday. Great reps plan their day yesterday. I always like reps that make that call, that first call before 9 o'clock. Right? As you said, how I start the day is how the day is going to go. I love that expression. It's those reps that come in, that log in, they stroll in at about 8:40. Then they organize their desk, and then they walk down to Starbucks, and then they BS with their peers. Or the rep who comes in and boy, by 8:45, they've made their first phone call. They've had a conversation. They've already got the juices flowing from the day. So I really want to start my day off with a call before 9 o'clock. And if I do that, I'm going to have a great day. I'm going to be very, very productive.
Yeah, those are great bits of advice. And, as I'm sitting here thinking about this, Tom mentioned before, sales is a noble profession. Sales is the most important profession in any company. I once worked for a $2 billion software company, and the CEO used to say, the last person out the door before we turn off the lights on our last day is going to be our worst selling professional, our worst salespeople. The reason your company exists is because of you and because of people like on the panel who lead you. This is a serious position. Take that seriously, practice, implement things. All right, I'm going to ask our panelists, give us a last bit of advice, 10, 15 seconds. Then I'm going to ask Tom to kind of wrap it up. And then we have a special announcement as well. So let's go, Kevin, Brian, and then Tom, you'll kind of bring us home. So Kevin, just 15, 20 seconds, final thought you want to make sure you get across.
Well, you got a lot of great advice today. And my advice would be take some of this advice, right? You don't have to take it all, but pick one. Pick one or two of the things that you heard today, whether it was from myself or Brian or Tom, and implement it today. And you'll start to see that things will, your pipeline will fill, and so will your wallet.
It's all about execution.
Yeah. Kevin, I actually whispered that to Kevin, and he stole it from me. So when Fred and I first got together at one of these events way back in the day, we had talked about action planning. Is that every single time that you have a speaker up there, there's so many great thoughts and ideas, right? And we should walk away with an action plan, right? And an action plan is exactly what Tom just spoke about, right? Something that you're going to commit to, you're going to put in your calendar, and you're going to get it done. And there is great power in achievement, right? But there's also great reflection in loss, right? So don't just think that you're losing, right? Every time that you lose, you're going to figure out how to win, right? And so I would say that don't be too hard on yourselves. This is an extremely difficult profession. I have had the highs of my career and the lows of lows in my career. And by starting the day as I always started it, I always knew that there was another wave that I was going to catch, right? Just because the seas are flat right now. Be purposeful in your efforts, even when the seas are flat, because eventually that wave's going to come. But be prepared to ride it.
All right, so we have some questions from the audience. We'll running out of time here. We'll get them to you. We end every sales stage live with what we kind of call the after the sales stage live. So I'm excited to bring on Tom Snyder. Before I bring on Tom to kind of wrap up, let's give a nice round of applause for all of our panelists today for their great insights. And like Brian said, is anybody here going to get in their car at some point today? Is anybody going to get in the car? Good. You're going to forget 50% of what we talked about today. So you need to implement at least one thing that you saw today. I saw a lot of you taking notes like I advised. Good. Implement, execute, take action. We have a special announcement, but before we get to that, Tom, why don't you kind of wrap things up for us today?
I'm going to come down here. So most of you have probably never heard of a guy named Matt Stutzman. Matt Stutzman was a participant in the Olympics. In fact, he was leading the men's archery team. I think it was the Beijing Olympics. And I had become so disillusioned over my life at the broadcast of the Olympics because when I was much younger, they focused on the sports, but then NBC started making all these life stories and you got very little sports. I returned to the Olympics when ESPN started broadcasting the non-glamorous sports. So the first one on the list was archery. I said, okay, I'll think of archery. The theme of this is what I said before, practice. Because you see, the man who led our archery team, Matt Stutzman, was born without arms. Now, I don't know about you or how many times you've tried to fire a bow and arrow, but it's not easy. And he became a world-class athlete having a birth defect of no arms. He shot the bow with his feet. Now, I can just imagine how difficult that was. But what was the key to it? Practice. Practice. Now, fortunately for all of us, sales is an easier field than trying to be an archer with no arms. I'm making the point of the inspiration should be not specifically any of the things you've heard here or in the other ones, but to take one thing, and dissect it and then put it in your calendar. My time of practice is 15 minutes on Mondays and Thursdays. And here's the one thing I took away from the IEPS event I recently attended to, and I'm going to research it and practice it, either with a colleague, ideally with my manager, maybe someone from sales enablement, maybe somebody that is a friend of yours, but I'm going to practice. Most of you won't, but those that do are going to rise to the top. Because this is a profession of practice. It's just like any other skill.
All right. Once again, thank you so much, Tom, Kevin, and Brian. All right. We have a special treat. Gita Stracuzzi, who runs the Center for Elevating Women in Sales Leadership, just published her new book, Success Was Never the Hard Part, Setbacks, Comebacks, and the Rise of Women in Sales Leadership. Before she says a few words, let's give her a round of applause for publishing a book. Has anyone here read a book? Of course you have. Add it to your calendar, read a sales book. So we're going to have the opportunity to have some signings. Just tell us about your book and why'd you publish it and why should people read it?
Well, and it's not just for women. Okay. And to the point you asked earlier, what are people thinking? Gentlemen, this will give you some ideas of what they're thinking. Okay. And really what women go through and men go through things too, but that's Fred's lane. So this book really is to highlight the triumphs in sales, even through really difficult setbacks, and you'll have them. Life gets messy, right? And these are messy stories, and it's really about how these particular women rose to the top. But in there, you can see yourself, whether you're male or female, or maybe you have a sister or you work with women. And people keep things to themselves for the most part, right? So if somebody's struggling, you might not even know it. And then when they have really great comebacks, everybody celebrates, right? So this is really about what it takes to survive in sales and then thrive, really. And it's for everybody. So if you don't want to read a whole bunch of stories about women, you can give it to your sister or your mother or a coworker or whatever. Anyway, I did it because I have talked to some amazing women and I've met them and worked with them in the Women in Sales Leadership Forum, of which Cvent has sent many people through, and companies that our friend here has been involved with, both of our friends. They have sent women through, and Caresoft has sent a bunch through. So you probably know some of the women in this book, but that's why I did it.
All right, let's give her a nice round of applause. So, by the way, we have an office. If you're at Caresoft or a partner, 205W. Come by anytime. If you have any follow-up questions, once again, make sure you link in to Tom Snyder, Brian Green, Kevin Carr, me, Fred Diamond, or Gina Stracuzzi. We still have food in the back. Thank you all so much. Thank you for the commitment to yourselves. Tell your friends. We do this typically every month. So love to have you, and thanks again for being here. Gina has a bunch of books we're going to offer to sign, and we'll take pictures of Gina signing. So thanks again.